All right, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Do some quick introductions up here at the table. To my right, Superintendent Degner, Directors Pilcher Hayek and Eastham. To my left, Vice President Malone, Directors Clausen and Finch, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak, they do need to complete a speaker form out in the lobby and turn it in. And folks will have 4 minutes to speak to the board, and you'll see the time up on the screens when you start. So we can get right into it. First up for community comment is Joseph Dobrian.
Joseph Dobrian, 1015 2nd Avenue. I call the board's attention to an item that appeared in the district's most recent Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion newsletter. I quote, "Last month, all our grades 5 through 12 students in the Iowa City Community School District received a lesson created by the Equity Department about hate speech, racial slurs, and derogatory language. This lesson taught our students how to identify derogatory language, slurs, and hate speech, and to recognize the impact it has on others. Students then learned how they can create a community culture in which this language is unacceptable, both online and offline. Students were then asked to work together to create their own hate speech policies. Among the proposed rules were advocated a no-tolerance policy for hate speech, regardless of intent. It was also proposed that class time be devoted to understanding why using that language is wrong. Perhaps the school should even add a specific class that just addresses these things," end quote. Missing from the article was any definition of the term hate speech. I call this a glaring omission and a dangerous one. How does the Equity Department and the district define hate speech? For that matter, how do you define hate? What is a no-tolerance policy for hate speech regardless of intent? Does not the phrase regardless of intent mean that any policy regarding hate speech must inevitably be arbitrary and capricious? Without clear definition, might the term hate speech be used promiscuously to suppress any expression that people in power object to? If neither policy nor speech is specifically defined, what could be the intent of this lesson? Finally, has this lesson been made available to parents and other interested observers in the district? Could I get a copy of it? For starters, I would like to just hear a clear definition of hate speech. Is it language that derogates a person or group of people in any way? Is it derogatory speech that is directed against a certain idea or a certain lifestyle? Is the concept of hate speech flexible so that, for example, criticism of a star-bellied sneetch might be called hate speech, but equivalent criticism of a plain-belly sneetch might not be? Might any speech be called hate speech according to the whim of the person who makes the accusation? Don't people sometimes express dislike or disapproval without hating the thing or person that they dislike? What is the difference between hate speech and mere criticism? Could a simple observation of fact be called hate speech if observing that fact is deemed politically unacceptable? By all means, let's have dialogue in our schools on the broad subjects of etiquette and civility. That's great. But let the Equity Department's initiatives be transparent and let their terms be defined. I ask God's blessing on your deliberations. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Next up, we have Kyle Hunter.
My name is Kyle Hunter. I live in North Liberty, Iowa, and my 4 daughters attend Grant Elementary School, or at least I wish they were. Currently, all 4 are being denied that opportunity because of your mask mandates. after many months and many attempts of trying to express our concerns, only to be brushed off with the obligatory, "Thank you for expressing your concerns. We will refer you to our mask policy." We have come to the conclusion that this district does not care about our concerns, and I presume a significant number of other families' concerns. The school district should be a unifying force in our community, but instead has sown division, hatred, and animosity between the members of this community. The district says they are following the current CDC guidelines, but the CDC is beholden to the administration that they serve under. The district says they are listening to the experts from Johnson County Public Health. What does expert even mean? My father is a physician at the University of Iowa and has acted as an expert witness in medical malpractice cases. And I'm sure he would be the first to tell you that it doesn't matter whether you're a defendant or a plaintiff, you will always be able to find an expert to testify on your behalf. The experts used to tell us that the earth was flat and the sun revolved around the earth. Science can be questioned. Science isn't perfect, and it is only through questioning of science and the experts that progress can be made. So what is harder to question? The answer is evidence, and what we see right in front of our faces. But that is exactly what the district is asking us to do. They're asking us to deny the evidence and what we see with our own eyes. The school districts surrounding this district have no mask mandates. Based on the experts at the CDC and Johnson County Public Health, these school districts should be ravaged by COVID, but that is not the case. On a personal level, myself and my two oldest daughters suffer from contact dermatitis, which is annoying all the time and can be measurable at others. After a dermatologist at the University of Iowa acknowledged both the problem and the mask being the cause, my daughter was denied a medical mask exemption, but instead they said she could be prescribed steroids and she could come to the clinic 3 times a week for phototherapy. We were then told that it was the dermatology's department policy not to give exemptions and that they have not given one to anyone during the entire pandemic. What is the point of an exemption if no one can qualify for one, even for a valid reason? We are told that masks are to protect us from COVID. I wonder how many people the masks have failed at this point. I could point to study after study that at minimum question the efficacy of masks, and at most say they are a detriment to the physical and mental well-being of the health of the wearer. Nowhere is this more evident than in our youth. My middle daughter has had difficulty with speech. She is taken out of the classroom several times a week to work on her speech. I am also often worried that the masks are also causing her depression and anxiety. She comes home from school many days crying, asking me when she can stop wearing a mask at school. As a father, my job is to comfort and protect her, but you have denied me that ability. Not all problems and concerns are visible. In fact, it's these unseen problems that concern me the most. We don't know what many of our kids are feeling because they are unable to express their problems. We love the teachers our children have and are grateful for all that they do for them. This is not the fight that I wanted to have, but it's the fight my children asked me to make. What am I asking from you today? Eliminate the influence of outside parties in our district and cede your power to the parents, students, and families of this school district. I know I have no confidence that this will move any of you, and most likely falling on deaf ears.
All right.
My children
Thank
will
you,
know
Kyle.
that I am standing for them, and hopefully others will feel the same way and know that they are not alone. Trust me, I know how hard it is to stand alone. Not to speak
Thank
is
you.
to speak.
That's your time.
Not to act is to act. Silence in the face of evil is evil itself, and I will not be silent.
Next up, Courtney Anderson.
Courtney Anderson, Iowa City, proud homeschool mom and child advocate for all. Our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. We're now entering our 3rd year into this pandemic, and your email today shows that all the emails us parents have sent have fallen on deaf ears because you are hell-bent on following the CDC and the Johnson County Public Health mandates and their recommendations. Again, their recommendations. They have failed numerous times. Here are a few of the examples in which they have failed. 15 days to slow the spread, mask until vaccinated, vaccines needed at 1 shot, 2 shots, a booster shot, and we are still masked. I would like to remind you that Clear Creek Amana School District is under the same recommendations, and their students have been unmasked all year long, and there has not been a spike in their COVID cases. It currently is against the law to mandate masks on kids, but you guys have gotten yourself into a lawsuit that is discriminating against kids that are hard of hearing, have speech delays, and dyslexic. 1 in 5 kids is dyslexic, and I take this to heart. That is 20% of your student population. Do you know what kids who have dyslexic need? They need to see lips moving. They need to be able to read the lips of their peers and their teachers to discern between sounds. Are you going to be liable for the damages that you are inflicting on these kids? Suicide and self-harm is up 51%, especially in girls, over these last 2 years. Speech pathologists have seen a rise in speech delays and impairments up 350%. Kids are not okay. We ask that they be resilient, but this is unnecessary. This is a risk that they should not have to take on, especially when you are seen at basketball events and Christmas parties unmasked. Do as I say, not as I do. That is what our kids are seeing. As of today, in Iowa, according to the CDC, there is not one death from the ages of 0 to 17, not one death due to COVID. 99.99% of kids who are masked will survive COVID. So will 99.99% of kids who are unmasked will survive COVID. They are not transmitters and they are not vectors of disease. Are you going to be held accountable and liable for the damages that you are inflicting on these kids? Masking kids is tragic, it's unscientific, and it is damaging to their physical, intellectual, language, emotional, and social development. We demand our rights back as parents to make the health decisions for our kids. It is not yours to make, it is ours. Make the masks optional, much like Mid-Prairie, Clear Creek, Amana, and Solon school districts have made for this year. This is not something our kids should have to be putting up with. You guys are on the wrong side of history, and it's time to end this mask mandate today.
Next up, Lisa Gumper.
My name is Lisa Gumper of North Liberty, and I am here to request the mask mandate at schools end. All parents have the right to make choices for their children. Masking children for the last 2 years has health risk. Have we considered at what cost we are masking all children? Studies have been done to determine the side effects of constant mask wearing. They have found children are having difficulty with concentrating, drowsiness, fatigue, and headaches, resulting in impaired learning, irritability, depression, and a reluctance to go to school. There are studies that show bacteria growth on a face mask. During the day, the masks are touched to adjust it or to eat and drink, leaving germs behind. And guess what? They get to breathe those the rest of the day. Children with speech or hearing disabilities have been at a disadvantage. Sound is muffled and facial gestures are not viewable with mask on. What damage are we doing to our children? I am not asking you to say no one can wear a mask. If parents want their child to wear a mask, that is their choice. The Surgeon General recently released a report reflecting the mental health of our school children. The report is astonishing as it reflects the number of high school students who reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness has increased by 40%, and a shocking 36% increase in the number of suicide attempts. Have you asked yourself, what damage are we doing to our children? Have you asked the student body how they feel? What damage are we doing to our children? Has that been considered? There are early treatments now and vaccines available for those who wish. Why are we still acting like there's no treatment out there? School districts around the area have been going to school without masks all year. Some do have a level that once that number of students are out for COVID, they say put the mask on, but it has never been more than 2 weeks. Just the affected school wears them too. Why are we different? Please don't say it's the university. Employees and students of the university live in those communities too. If you haven't figured it out yet, COVID is not going away. It's been here for 2 years. It's time we learn to live again and learn to live with COVID in the community. Unmask our children and let them have a chance to live a happy, prosperous life again. I pray you realize we cannot continue to have our children masked at school, and you give the choice of masking back to where it belongs, in the hands of the parent. Thank you.
All right, next up, Dina Bashara.
Hi, friends. I'm kind of wishing I came on a different night, but we'll make do, huh? All right, Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. Over 100 individuals and 14 local organizations have joined the ICCSD Mental Health Special Education and Disability Advocacy Group's call to end exclusionary discipline for elementary students. For years, this district, advocates like me, school board members like you, have gnashed our teeth over the fact that we persistently discipline some students more than others. Which students? Poor, Black, and disabled students. Despite our self-flagellation, our committees, our subcommittees, and our work groups, those disproportionalities have not gone away. And in fact, for Black and disabled students, they have gotten worse. And then one day it dawned on me, why is it exactly that we are suspending students at all? We carry on as though if only we were disciplining students proportionally, then we could really pat ourselves on the back for how incredibly fair we all are. So I started looking at the research, and 3 things quickly became clear. 1, suspensions don't work. No, there's no evidence that it deters future misbehavior. 2, suspensions actually harm students in a number of ways, including lost instruction, lost wages for parents, isolation, and increased likelihood of incarceration. And 3, suspensions harm our most vulnerable students, the poor, Black, and disabled ones, the most. They are not my opinions. They're not anyone's opinions. It's a consensus of the scientists who study the educational system, of PBIS itself, and of the federal government. So I would like to ask each of you to ask yourself, why do we allow the practice to persist? Because that's the way it's always been? Because we like punishment for punishment's sake? Because it's easy? Because we don't know what to do instead? And are we okay with excuses and justifications of this caliber for policies and practices that we know are racist, ableist, and classist in both application and outcomes? You know the numbers. The numbers who are real children who are really struggling with lack of sleep, conflict at home, trauma, kids who are stuck in fight or flight, who have neurological differences that make being in the classroom harder than you or I could ever imagine. Kids who don't have the skills yet to meet the expectations of the adults around them. Kids whose days are shaped by earning tokens and candy and access to iPads, and who are constantly under threat of losing access to breaks and recess and other preferred items. From B.F. Skinner, the father of behaviorism, the theory upon which so much of our system of discipline and punishment is based, says, severe punishment unquestionably has an immediate effect in reducing a tendency to act in a given way. This result is no doubt responsible for its widespread use. We instinctively attack anyone whose behavior displeases us, perhaps not in physical assault, but with criticism, disapproval, blame, or ridicule. Whether or not there is an inherited tendency to do this, the immediate effect of the practice is reinforcing enough to explain its currency. In the long run, he says, however, punishment does not actually eliminate behavior from a repertoire, and its temporary achievement is obtained at tremendous cost in reducing the overall efficiency and happiness of the group. Its temporary achievement is obtained at tremendous cost. We expect the district to implement ethical, research-based policies and practices that maximize positive outcomes for all of our children. When you know better, you do better. Thank you.
Next up, Noah.
Hello, my name is Noah. So I'm here to speak to you today about, hybrid meetings. To start off with that, and I finally got the proposal. What's the exact number here? $214,000 proposal, which was the excuse proposal given to me. Which I would like to know how to have hybrid meetings. You would need $56,987 for visual equipment. That has not necessary for having hybrid meetings. Display systems equipment for $37,614.33. How is that needed for having hybrid Zoom meetings, which are ADA compliant? Once again, I'm going to just reiterate. You can ask Roy Sand right there how they have hybrid meetings if it's not ADA compliant. I'm sorry, I just had to use you as an example, your board example. You have the audio system for $41,000, which is, and the control system for $9,826. Which are the only two like somewhat reasonable things on there. Though lots of those things on there, absolutely not necessary for having hybrid meetings that I could like do on my phone right now, like plug it in. I don't know if my phone exactly would be the one that does it, but like could do it. My point is, that was really sad to see that. I knew what the proposal was going to be, like a nonsense excuse, and it was a nonsense excuse because it was full of stuff that you don't need. It's just, you don't need. Look in this county. It's Iowa City recently switched over after being forced to switch. Once they officially said, okay, we're going to do this, then the next meeting after they officially said we're going to do this, they had it at the senior center. They didn't have to spend $200K to do that. And I also got months ago an estimate from Coralville, and what they gave me, if you even need to spend money, what their estimate was $10K, and that still seems on the high end of that. So that's drastically less. I mean, that proposal was for like updating this whole room and stuff, which is really, I don't have an opinion on whether you should do that or not, but I know that's not necessary for having hybrid meetings, and that's not okay to give that an excuse. It really ties into the ableism that is rife in this community that the previous speaker just like spoke on to you about like how ableism is. This district is clearly okay with upholding ableism and is just going to drag its feet on fixing it. And you're going to give your equity update tonight, and are going to like talk about maybe we should actually make this district equitable. And having hybrid meetings would be a very easy first step in doing that. And, ending suspensions. So that's another, not quite as easy, but pretty easy first step. So yeah. Also, more time. So I know you are apparently going to be working on your lunch program for people who are suspended because you were cruelly denying them food by only having a 1 hour pickup for the three cities that you serve, only 1 hour time to pick up people. So apparently students, minors can get to a building in 1 hour of the day. That better be fixed soon. Thanks.
All right, next up, Laura Crossett.
Good evening. My name is Laura Crossett. I am an Iowa City resident, a graduate of the Iowa City Community School District, and the parent of a current student. I'm also here with the Iowa City MSD group. The dark. White men with beards. Fire at night. Being alone. That your mother would die. That you'd be in trouble at school. That you'd get beaten at home for being in trouble at school. Tornadoes. Being shut in a small, hot, dark space. That your parents would split up. That your parents would get back together. Cops, blood, laundromats, being away from home, aquariums, nuclear war, dogs, that the car you were riding in would go out of control, shadows. Close your eyes for a moment, if you can, and think back to when you were a child. What was the most frightening thing in the world? Whether it happened to you directly, or you read about it in a book, or saw it in a movie, or whether you imagined it. Think back to that fear. Feel it. Now imagine that it's happening, or something like it. What do you do? I always tell my kid that the back part of your brain, apologies to the neuroscientist people, if there are any in the room, for this oversimplification. The back part of your brain is where you go first when fear strikes, and it tells you to fight or to run away every time it encounters a monster or what it thinks is a monster. Part of the process of growing up is learning which things are monsters and which aren't. And part of it is teaching the front part of your brain not to run away or hit or kick, because for the most part, the monsters aren't real. Except they are in that moment when you're having that visceral reaction. And if that visceral reaction is fight, it can get you in a lot of trouble. Exactly the kind of trouble that leads to suspensions, even of elementary school students. Now, I know we've given you a lot of statistics, and I know that you have, or I hope you've learned something about implicit bias in the past few years, if you aren't already someone who is the target of it, in which case you probably don't really need to learn about it. But behind each statistic in that report is a kid with an entire life story that we can't get from demographics. Every time we kick one of those kids out of school for the day, they miss out on an education, but so do we. Thank you.
That was our last speaker for community comments, so we will move on into our agenda. And first up is approval of tonight's agenda. I'd entertain a motion.
I move approval of the agenda for tonight.
Second.
Kim?
Online voting is open.
I'm a yay, Kim. I have to log in.
Oh, I'm not here either. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, so next up is the consent agenda. Were there any questions from directors after reviewing the bills they'd like to bring up? All right, any items they would like to pull from the consent?
I do want to pull one item. Let me find it.
You said number 5?
It's not number 5.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, I said I want to find it. Number 7.
All right. Anything else? All right, I'd entertain a motion to approve minus item number 7.
So moved.
Second?
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, so item 7 is the AEI Speakers Bureau Agreement.
Yeah, I just want to draw attention to this and thank the staff for bringing Mr. Fleming in. Somebody we got the pleasure of seeing at the ISB conference earlier in the year, and not only is he a very dynamic speaker, I think his story is going to speak to the heart of a lot of what we're doing, his experiences. And the way he has been able to, turn those experiences into really a lot of educational accomplishment for underserved kids. It's an impressive story. I think our staff is really going to be moved by him. And his message that I took away in one of our sub-sessions was this idea of love first, teach second. And he's, again, dynamic and charismatic. He'll be a great guy to deliver this. So I just want to thank staff for bringing him in. And that kind of made my day when I saw that on the agenda, so thank you.
Thanks, JP. We thought he'd be a great event to open the year, and like you said, a great story of connection and what a adult can do to inspire an individual and turn their story around. And that was the power in his message he shared with us. What was that, November, I think, at the school board convention. And so we're excited about that too. We think it's a really inspiring way to start the school year, and I think addresses some of the continual improvement work we do, right, about how to address that and how to continually improve as a district.
So thanks. And so I'll move that we approve item number 7, the Speakers Bureau Agreement.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. Next up, we have a couple of public hearings. First up, Health Office Bid Package Number 1. Vice President Malone.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2022 Health Office HVAC Upgrades Bid Package Number 1 project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on February 8, 2022. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on February 9, 2022. The district will receive bids on this project at 2 p.m. February 23, 2022 at the Facilities Management Office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on February 9, 2022. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we can close that public hearing and move on to our second one.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2022 Health Office HVAC Upgrades Bid Package Number 2 project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on February 8, 2022. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on February 9, 2022. The district will receive bids on this project at 2 p.m. February 24, 2022 at the Facilities Management Office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on February 9, 2022. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we can close that public hearing. Next up, we have our policy review section. As a reminder, this is the second time the 400 series has come before the full board, and you'll see it later on to take action on it. Most of the edits were already there when we brought it before the board last time. I think there were a couple that we discussed in P&G earlier that night that are reflected in this second reading, but there were some kind of minor word changes, no substantive changes there since the last time director saw it. But this would be a good time if you have questions or comments on any of the 400 series, so we will take action later. All right, we'll come back to that in a second. All right, so now we can move into our discussion sections. And first up is our health and safety update. Matt?
Sure, I'll be taking that tonight as Chase isn't with us this evening. A few things you saw, the note that went out to the school community today. Due to a number of inquiries we've been getting about the mask requirement and what our current stance has been. It seems that there's been some news around the CDC potentially shifting, in the coming days, or some of that information's been coming out. We don't know how soon or really have any read other than the rest of you on when or if that might happen. It does seem that, if the CDC has switched requirements for the public, sometimes the school guidance follows about a week or two later, that they kind of drill down that level. So we'll be on the lookout for that, and of course would bring that conversation to you if that should happen. But I think the other item we kind of wanted to address with you this evening, that's probably just to put a reminder out there, that I think on the 8th of March, when we come back for our next meeting, we'd like to have a larger conversation around some of the other health and safety protocols we've had and what makes sense to continue it through the spring, things like visitors, volunteers, indoor field trips, 50% room capacity, our outdoor athletic guidelines. There's some of those things that we've held on to for a pretty long time that may make some sense to revise or look at again. And of course, as this conversation around the mask requirement continues to evolve, it would seem to make sense to just have some conversation on the 8th in regards to those health and safety protocols. So that was kind of the second item with that. We just wanted to prompt you for a conversation on the 8th around some of those other pieces. And then the last thing would be, as you've noticed on our COVID data tracker on the school district website, with the state shutting down their own website there, we've had a blank or a missing data set on that COVID data tracker for the school district website. So I think we'd suggest to use the CDC COVID data tracker if you want us to put another mechanism in there. A lot of our health and safety protocols, remember, are aligned around our statuses in a high transmission, and then they have moderate and substantial also as terminology in there. And so that would probably make the most sense for us to align in there and give people, another piece of information if they visit our site around what the community transmission rate looks like, since we can't use the Iowa site. So if that sounds reasonable to you, I think we would go ahead and make that change. I kind of see some nodding heads. If anybody has opposition to that, we can sure talk through that this evening. But those would have been the big things around the health and safety update I wanted to share with you tonight, just to, where we're at with the mask requirement, what to continue to watch for, the conversation on the 8th around some other protocols, and maybe trying to take another look at those, and then finally the data tracker piece.
Throw it out there to directors, comments, questions?
So Matt, if the state's changes in their assessment or tracking practices makes it impossible for us to do community tracking, but we can still, as I understand it, we can still publish our results about in-school infections and recoveries. Is that correct?
Yeah, our student and staff data is still reporting on there, Charlie, and so you still see those daily numbers come in for student and staff reporting. It's just the Johnson County positivity rate that we'd been pulling from that site's no longer available to us there, so we would switch to that CDC COVID data tracker.
And do we know anything any different? I think not, but I'm going to ask this anyway. Did we know any changes in the legal proceedings that we're a party to?
No, I have no significant update or substantial update at this point around that. We continue to touch base with Attorney Holland on a weekly basis to see if there's anything there. Remember, the crux of some of that argument now with the request for an in-bank appeal from the governor and her team involves that the parents hadn't exhausted their administrative remedies. And so depending on when or if we get some guidance on that, I think it would directly apply to or entitled students and their ability to access FAPE. So that's really what we'd be looking for on additional guidance that way about how parents would make that request and then how to address those. But I don't have a substantive update for you on that this evening.
Okay.
Other directors? And I look forward to the conversation on the 8th around some of those other mitigation things. I think that's timely for sure. And, if we hear, changing guidance from the CDC, I think that'd be very relevant to bring forward as well. All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Sean,
Go ahead.
just to be clear, I certainly will pay attention to CDC guidance and the Health and Safety Committee's recommendations. I'm also just wanting to to assure ourselves that we're going to follow the thrust of the federal courts, federal district courts legal opinion, which is basically that kids with disabilities have specific requirements that districts have to consider and comply with in deciding about their overall mitigation efforts, including mask policies.
Yeah, we certainly will follow the direction or the ruling that comes from there, Charlie. I think those are some of the things that are work to be sorted out through that ruling is what is that remedy and what is their path to achieve that. Is the stance of a whole district requirement sufficient? Is there a lesser requirement that could be accomplished the same thing for the families that have that concern? So that's part of, I think, what's still being sorted out in there. But of course, we'll follow where that case rests and what the law and the guidance coming to us is in that point. Yep.
Sean, I was just going to mention, I think that the district so far has done what it can based on the information it receives at the time. And so as we look forward, we know things could continue to change. And March 8th, I like what we're going to be considering, but between now and then, we don't know what else will happen. This is a very tricky situation for the country and for our state and for our school district. So we're just going to have to make our decisions as wisely as we can. And I think the district has done a good job of doing that so far. So we have to stick to that.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, let's move on to our equity update.
Amy's going to take that for us and then probably introduce somebody else here.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. So if you remember, we are set to take a different topic each time now. We're taking a deeper dive with about a 10-minute presentation tonight. And this board meeting, we're going to focus on professional development, and we'll hear from Laura Daly and Laura Gray.
Oh, hello, can you hear me? Hi, everyone. So what we're doing in our department, which is equity department, we are working still with our equity ambassadors in a micro-credentialing course, so we're still pushing forward with that. There'll also be some offerings for teachers coming up in the near future that is in addition to the micro-credentialing, so that'll be in the equity newsletters coming up. The other piece is that we are still pushing forward with our hate speech follow-ups. So the next one is around empathy and what empathy has to do with combating hate speech. And so that's on the docket coming up very soon. Thank you.
If I could, I've read the equity newsletter that was referenced earlier. I thought it was really informative. I have to admit, I've never looked at the whole thing. It's really good, and the portion about hate speech I thought was really, really well done. And how you had, I believe you referenced how Northwest was creating, they gave a shot of like working together and figuring out what it means and how to protect each other, and I thought it was beautiful.
It's really cool because we're still getting schools to send in, stuff that their students are doing. Like just recently, some fifth graders at Hoover made a presentation on being empathy warriors. So we look to include that. We have a dynamic team that works on that newsletter. So just a shout out to the equity team. Restorative justice. Yep. And in regards to restorative justice, our ambassadors are still working with individual schools, and we've met with all the 10 schools that we're rolling things out to have individual meetings, and every building has a different need, and so we're assisting those buildings with what they need individually. So most of them want to start with educating their staff and just getting them just used to circles within their school meetings, and they're starting that already. So, yeah, that's what's happening with RJ right now. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'll continue on with the rest of the update, more focused on the social, emotional, behavioral health, professional development that our learning supports department team has been providing in a webinar format. I think it was January when I gave another quick little update. And what's happened since then is we've had one more professional development session. The foundation of all of these are based upon building relationships and evidence-based strategies to implement culturally responsive teaching practices with an SEL focus, and using the PBIS framework, 6 effective teaching practices. And it's all foundational learning that we're getting a variety of feedback from our staff about that I'll share here in just a little bit. Our team develops the content. We kind of work with Grantwood AEA a little bit and pull from a variety of different resources as well to be able to provide the professional development. And we create a participants guide, an administrator guide. We ask that our schools do the PD when they are participating in the webinar format in some sort of collaborative way. So it isn't just a sit and get and sitting alone in one person's classroom. They either sit as a whole staff or a group, or like a PLC group or a department level group. We build in time to process and turn and talk, and then have in the administrator's guide just a whole host of suggestions for how those administrators can work with their building level teams to continue it so that it doesn't just seem like a one and done. Maybe connecting to some of the work that the equity department and team is doing and the lessons that Laura was just talking about, integrating that with the classroom practices and the culturally responsive teaching and the SEL competencies that are woven into that as well. We did a pre-assessment way at the beginning, which would have been in December, and we'll do a post-assessment in May when our final one is complete. And then after each session, we also do an exit slip that's specific to that particular PD session. And so since we've done 2 so far this year, one of them fell on one of our snow days, so we had hoped to have done 3 at this point, but we've done 2. And we ranged from 650 to 670 responses, which is a pretty good response rate considering the number of teachers in the district. And I think last time I explained that, kind of gave overall a rating of 1 to 5 with how practical and useful it was. And the results so far have been very similar in that this last time it was 44% of the people who responded said it was in the range of 5, 34% of 4, 18% of 3. And so that kind of means altogether about 80% of the responses were saying that it is practical and relevant, at least to some degree, by giving us a 4 and a 5. But then they also give a lot of open narrative feedback that's super informative and helpful. And just, I wanted tonight share a couple little snippets of the feedback. I mean, it's from 670 or so different teachers, so I can't share it all, but just some of the themes were how much they value the time with their staff to talk about these important issues. Some of the feedback we're getting is saying it seems basic, but it's really good to go back to foundational learning and to have a common understanding across the district of these evidence-based practices. Somebody said, just thinking about my classroom setup and how it can affect my students, thinking more about what students actually want to see in the classroom that make it more comforting, safe, and an accepting place for them is something I haven't thought about for a while. Someone else said that physical environments and routines, that was the bulk of the content of our last PD session, have a lot to do with culturally responsive and trauma-informed teaching practices. And then there were, we're getting such great feedback, but this was just one more that I pulled out, that the work that one of the educators shared with us, that the work that we need to be doing as a district is examining our own hearts and minds around bias, inconsistent expectations that we hold for students, and how to build warm, welcoming communities within our school buildings. All of this is important and relevant, and there was more to it, but then the final comment was, I just want people to lean into the discomfort and change their practices for the betterment of students. So those are just some really good anecdotes from the feedback that we're getting. And the thing I'll kind of leave us with tonight is this is perhaps one of the first times that we've had this universal PD that we're providing to all teachers and the support staff that are able to participate in the webinars. And so it just creates kind of a common ground for all of us to build from. I've had a lot of principals contact me or other members of our team to say, so how can we build upon this? Or can you have someone come out and do kind of a more specific PD related to one of the aspects of, the all district PD? And again, I think it's to some of the feedback that we're getting is it's good teaching, but yet we also don't want to take it for granted. Making things explicit and being very clear about what the evidence-based practices are is great. And the last thing I will say is, again, we're highlighting our own district teachers in the PD. And so when we're giving examples, it's teachers from a variety of different schools. And so I think that really, shines a light on a lot of the great things that are going on in the district as well.
Thank you, Laura and Laura. Before we entertain any questions, I would just probably should have started and prefaced this whole piece by saying, what were our learnings that came out of the pandemic? Well, one of the learnings was that we had to do school differently. We were on Zoom, we learned how to use webinars, we were bringing return to learn information with our staff, and we quickly understood the power in being able to talk to all of our staff. And that's what we set forth and started doing last year when Laura Gray and her team were really delivering those professional developments around culturally responsive teaching, the culturally proficient continuum. And Laura provided a PD earlier this year around restorative justice and practices. And then the segue to social emotional learning, Laura Daly's team has done such a nice job of linking it back to that previous learning. And you can hear just in the comments that Laura has made there how critical it is for us to continue to make those connections for our teachers and then, of course, on the behalf of our students. And of course, you're hearing from speakers tonight about our discipline data or suspension data. So again, it's one more thing that we're trying to do. This is specific to classroom practices, examining your own biases, understanding where you're falling out on the cultural proficiency continuum, all relate to the work that we're doing to help, seeing some of the results that we're getting with our decline in office discipline referrals and suspensions. By no means have we arrived. We don't think that, this is the antithesis of where we can be, but it's really been awesome to kind of leverage this professional development that our PK-12 teachers are getting district-wide that is common. So it's been different for us the last 2 years, but like Laura said, it's amazing for just the fact that they get 600 responses from teachers each time after their professional development sessions are done. So it's really great to get that kind of feedback.
I'll just make a comment because I've gotten to attend some of these sessions just through my job, and I really appreciate some of the practical stuff. And so, just an example, in my classroom, pulling out the spreadsheet that just listed real tips for relationship building, with examples. And so I'm able to pull that out, turn it into some posters around the room. And especially for, where I'm at, a lot of times we'll have, nursing assistants come in and might be working with kids, not in the classroom, but using the space. I've got a lot of undergraduate classroom associates. And, for those types of folks, and then I imagine in the district for our paras and our other folks to see that kind of thing, like, hey, if you want to talk to a kid, here's some ideas. Here's an open-ended question. And I just think some of that's real practical, and it's easy to do. But I just think in the hustle and bustle of every day, the way we run our systems, people don't stop and think about this stuff, that it's really about building a relationship with each kid, and here are some ways you can do that. And so I certainly appreciate that, put that to practical use, and I apologize. I'm not always good about this. I'm not one of the 650 or 685 who's returning it. So my bad, but I'll tell you, it's still having a positive impact, even though I admit guiltily I didn't take the time to fill out the survey.
I will send you the feedback form while I'm sitting
Yeah,
here.
send that again. I think I missed it in my email. Thanks.
I'm sure you're applying it in your classroom, so even though you're not doing the feedback form, you're using the information, right? So, great. I just really want to commend all of you for a very encouraging, uplifting report and great results. I would like to go back to Laura Gray maybe and ask if you've seen much that you could identify as what students are telling you over the last several weeks, I guess, about things that if they're perceiving differences in the climate in their schools, especially if the number of instances of racial slurring and disrespectful racial behavior might be changing or not, or how that, if you can tell us anything at this point about that. I know I'm asking for information that's really a little bit too early to be asking about, but.
Right, so we haven't collected like any type of formal data in any way yet, only observational data and what people are reporting back. And so what we heard was that people had really great conversations in their classrooms at the 5th and 6th grade level and the secondary levels, and that they felt like it was taken more seriously. I almost fell out because I had heard of an incident that happened, and I thought it happened recently, like after we had started doing the lessons, but come to find out it was prior to the lessons had taken place. Now, I'm not suggesting that we won't get any more, incidences. These are adolescents, so on and so forth. However, I'm just like, hopefully seeds are getting planted as we're doing these, district-wide lessons that really just address and hate speech and address this idea of being kind and standing up for one another and empathizing, or like just perspective taking.
Thanks a lot, Laura.
Real quick follow-up, Laura. I know you said people are reaching out for some specifics, so I guess that is my question. What's our plan moving forward to differentiate? Really with both of these. I know, that was something with I remember going through the implicit bias, and that was some of our feedback, is we just need to identify where folks are at on the continuum and try to target folks where they're at. So what, I guess now that we are able to more easily blanket our message to everybody, what's the plan or to get that drilled down a little more specific and target folks for what they need?
Well, we already have started thinking about next year and starting from the beginning and, starting with this, the idea of identity and just like people being able to understand who they are and how they show up in the space, and then we can get them to the place of cultural proficiency, the students. That's something that we weren't able to do in the past, but we know now we have to be proactive and really, really roll that out from the beginning and really strategically with our students. So that's really the plan moving forward, that we'll be able to, do more with the students, where it's not kind of reaction, and it'll be proactive.
I really liked your way you described it as planting the seeds and hoping that works. It's never too late in any of these kids' development or even in adults' development to have those seeds planted about social justice. And I know my kid came out of the school that day and told me all about it. I mean, I think it's going to work. You just keep doing it like you are. And that's the best thing we can do to try to make that change from the inside of our district so that it goes outside of our district.
The other thing I would add about ways to differentiate in the continuation is, aside from the district PD, which is critically important, we also are constantly working with building teams to integrate the components of this PD as well as social emotional behavioral health, kind of the umbrella and everything that goes under that. And we don't have all the time in the world tonight to talk about that. But so we've got a handful, a little less than a handful of people on our district SEBH team that are in buildings constantly. And so they're working with the PBIS team, the building leadership teams, the IDS, and we got a lot of feedback from the instructional design strategists saying the tools and resources in the PD are very helpful because then they're coaching teachers on a day-to-day basis and are in those classrooms and sitting in the PLC meetings and department meetings and things like that, and are able to just, the more we can continue to just widen the awareness and the learning, the better, because, all district PD is a really great way to send some messaging, to be able to provide resources, to identify what we stand for as a district. But it really has to permeate throughout the system in order for it to ultimately impact students. And so that's, even though we're highlighting the PD, probably the day-to-day work and collaboration and consultation and the people on our team who are helping principals design a building-based Thursday PD, or going and helping a PBIS team kind of facilitate things and look at their data and figure out their action planning. So that's the other way that it's constantly differentiated, and probably even more important to integrate it on a day-to-day basis.
One last thing, because I think we could talk all night about this, that I think we want to share also, that wasn't on the radar, but because of what we were working through in November with the race and racism and the commitments that we made after that, part of that then is to offer over 2 days back to buildings for professional development purposes around climate and culture, that they could really think about what their staff needed. It could be hearkening back to previous professional development that Laura and Laura had done, lots of different topics, but we said if you had 2 days to kind of harness the efforts that have been made so far, what are some pieces that you might do to leverage with your staff? And so when you're talking about differentiation, all 29 of our attendance centers are going to have that opportunity. I'm going to maybe have the dates wrong, but March 10th and April 14th. So 2 of our upcoming professional development days to really focus on climate and culture needs specific to their buildings as well.
I'm just going to point one thing out just for context. When I started in the district, just concerning PD, the district-wide PD was everybody was going to take 3 years of reading training. And so even though I had a master's degree and I just graduated from reading, I started the training, and I think the instructor switched 4 times, and in the 3rd year they just gave up and they just quit. And it wasn't differentiated at all. People were getting training that their kids, they were never going to reach that level. And so the difference between the way we're doing all PD, and this is obviously critically important that we're even doing equity PD, that certainly wasn't a thing, but even something that we should know pretty well reading, the way it was delivered was just not, it wasn't very planful, and it was kind of haphazard, and then when it wasn't working, it just stopped with no follow-up. So the difference in the district for the last 15, 20 years is tremendous, and that's what gives me a whole lot of confidence that we are going to plant these seeds and it is going to work, because we're being consistent. We're also, even in my time on the board, we're being responsive, because we tried some PD that didn't land super well, and we shifted course, right? And we didn't just quit, but we decided, hey, we're going to do this differently. We're going to gather our resources together and try to do it correctly, instead of just saying, it's not working, forget it. So I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the leadership that's taking us down this path, and I really appreciate the way that it's done. And having had some less than impressive experiences in the past, I'm just really confident that we're headed in the right direction. So I just wanted to give that context for folks.
I just want to say that I really like what I'm hearing as well. I like that it's consistent district-wide with the webinar format, but that it's dynamic with the teams that you described, and that it's left our teachers wanting more. I think one of the issues that I heard during the campaign was, as described to me, that we have all these different initiatives in the district, but they're not necessarily being carried out at all of the buildings consistently. And so this seems like a positive response to that, and so I'm very pleased.
I was just gonna say, I'm excited about the empathy piece, right? I mean, it's really how you change that mindset of me and mine to us and ours, and that's huge, right? There's nothing wrong with me wanting to protect me and mine, right? I mean, I protect my family and, my kids and things, but it is a different mindset when you have to walk that mile in someone else's shoes, or just trying to understand someone else's, life up to this point, right? Like their experiences are different than yours, and it's going to frame all sorts of things. Yours are different than everybody else's, right? It's going to frame things differently. So I really appreciate that empathy piece, and I'm looking forward to that. Any other questions from directors?
Well, I just had one other comment too. I think one of the things that I've heard at Equity Committee meetings, especially since a number of students have joined the Equity Committee, is that students seem to be totally mystified by professional development. And at least the students on the Equity Committee, really would like to understand what it is that happens with that development training. So I'm not going to say that I think you should put 30 students on the professional development team and have them attend sessions and things like that. But is there some way that we can get more information to students about what their teachers are learning during the professional development time?
I think that's a great point, Charlie, and my wrap-up comment was going to be somewhat similar, but time reflects our priorities, right? It reflects our priority that we do an update here every meeting. It reflects a priority that we spend professional learning time on this with our staff, that time has been increased. Those priorities are important to us, and really the priority there is about impacting our climate and culture. And so Jane just sharing her experience from the campaign trail too around how all these things connect. I think one piece that we're really excited to talk to you guys about is the school improvement framework that we're ready to shift some conversation to moving forward, and how that will help connect these different dots, respect the journey that each school's on a little bit differently, how each teacher's on a different journey professionally in their learning and in their capacity to do the work. And so I think the conversation's ripe for us to do that, because we've invested in teams that can actually do this now. When Laura talks about RJ ambassadors, and then Laura Daly talks about her team of folks that can go out and support buildings, we have a lot of different things going on, and we need to also appreciate that for our classroom teachers and for our building principals. We're asking a lot. We're moving a lot of work forward. When we know we're doing a lot here, that's impacting the buildings in a very significant way. So how do we make all of that fit? What makes sense for where they're at in the process? How do we set some measurable outcomes? That's another part we talk about. And so I just always go back to that time reflects your priorities. And so when you see the time committed to it, and then our priority really has to be on that base level impacting climate and culture. And how do we know if we're doing that? So that kind of teases up for some also school improvement conversation that'll be good for the board to have in the spring and that we're excited to bring to you. So thanks for hearing the update around the equity tonight.
Thank you, Matt. Let's go ahead and move on. Our next topic is FMP 2.0 update. And I think the big reason that this is on here, we wanted to have it, at a board table, sort of discuss what we've been rolling around in work sessions prior to this point to make sure, it's very clear and up there. And so what we've talked about at the last couple of work sessions is a look at moving to a middle school format from junior high. We spent a good deal of time walking through pros and cons of it, quite honestly, and looking at the benefits and some of the negatives around that. We wanted to kind of bring that up in a more public setting up here at the board table, that's what we're kind of moving forward to. You could see there was some work in the Appendix 9 tonight, I think, that talked about it a little bit, some of the work moving forward. So that was a big piece. I don't know, Matt, if you wanted to kind of lead us in a different direction, but that's the thing I wanted to make sure we got talked about. So.
Yeah, I think the grade level configuration conversation was a really important one for the board to have, and something we had heard throughout the community engagement process leading up to the vote in November around the Pepple and Save extension. And so we're excited to continue that conversation, to look at reconfiguring those grade levels, and then also to see how we can better do teach and learning practices at that middle level and provide a higher level mid-level education to our students. And then, of course, it impacts our preschool efforts and some of the things we'd like to do from an early childhood education standpoint. And that was the focus of Ed Committee meeting last time, like President Eystone talked about. So I think those are the two big things we've moved recently around FMP 2.0. Of course, you guys have had a timeline shared with you. It's been attached to board docs. If the community wants to try to see some of those other projects that exist in there too, I'd encourage them to look at that timeline that's been into board docs a couple different points as we've done presentations. So I really think that was going to be the nexus of the update for us as well this evening.
Yeah, I didn't know how far folks wanted to go into the weeds and rehash some of the stuff that we had, brought up already in the conversation. I don't want to just repeat the conversation verbatim. Some of the highlights though, one of the, I guess, issues that have been brought up in the past, right, is that the current junior high format is fleeting and there's not as much engagement by students and families because they're not in there long enough to make some of the connections that you might get in, with a little bit longer time there. Potential more ability to offer more, a larger variety of options for our students at a younger age to kind of help them get on the path towards graduation and, in whatever way they might go. That was another plus for it. Certainly the potential, if disruption to, staff, there would be some rearrangements there, and that would be a pain point, right? And we'd have to kind of look at that. Matt talked to how it would impact pre-K. If you think about if we take a class, because I guess I didn't mention that, right? We're looking sort of 6-8 for the grade configuration. Take 6th graders out of a elementary school, there's some space there that A, would help just capacity issues, but B, might open up opportunities for pre-K there. I'm trying to just hit the highlights. I don't know if I'm getting them all, so feel free to jump in if I'm missing something.
I think you're getting them all, and it is important for if folks watching, listening, want to a more detailed conversation. We did have that on the February 8th work session that took place before the board meeting, and that recording is out there. But Matt, I was just wondering, since people will be looking at this agenda, can we have the timeline added to the FMP so that way they don't have to go from this agenda to the February 8th meeting, and that we just include that timeline going forward?
Yep,
Sorry,
I thought
didn't
about that
catch
when I said it
before
too.
tonight.
We should just load it on here. So
Yeah.
yep, we can get that done.
Thank you.
I just make the comment briefly that, one thing I appreciated about that conversation and this continuing conversation is that it really feels like the educational decisions are driving the facilities planning. And I think that's the way to do it, that we make our decisions based on what we feel as a group, with input from staff, what's going to be best for kids and their education, rather than just, well, we've got a bunch of kids and we need another building. So I appreciate that education is driving this, and I think folks will, if they tune in and listen to that February 8th conversation, we'll hear a lot of conversation about programming and ideas, aside from just, the nuts and bolts of costs. Having said costs, I do think, as we move forward, just being aware of any other costs that we're not thinking of. Busing has come to mind, that this is probably going to have an increase in busing costs when we're moving kids to fewer buildings from further across. So just as we move forward, that we're still mindful, obviously, of taxpayer dollars and that we're being good stewards thereof.
I'm just looking
You want
around.
to outline
Go
what's
ahead.
going to happen in the future here, in the near future, in terms of our consideration of the build-out plan and the other issues, just to inform people at this point?
Yeah, I can state a couple timeline things, Charlie. Thanks for that. So we would really be looking at starting the middle school concept in 2024, so the fall of 24 would be the timeline to move to that grade level configuration from grades 6 through 8. And then next year, we're hopeful to start a couple preschool pilot sites also that we're looking at, trying to stand up a couple pilot models. That was the conversation at the Education Committee meeting last week, so those sites are yet to be determined, but we're working through a model that would allow us to provide a full-day experience for kids, as we know that half-day experience for parents is a pretty difficult endeavor as they try to pick up in the middle of the day or drop off and don't have that full-day wrap care. So we're hopeful to try to learn a lot from those pilots and see what the district can do long-term knowing that that's really a big need we hear from a lot of our families, and then having that location be at the same place as there's other potential children's elementary school would be a great solution if we can make it all come together. So those would be a couple timeline parts. The real big thing on the preschool is just probably the couple pilot sites next year, knowing that that'll look at long-term expansion as if all goes well. So.
All right. Let's move to our next item on our agenda, into presentations and our quarterly financial report. Probably turn it over to Les.
Thank you, directors. You have the report in front of you. I think probably the most important page is the unspent balance page, is where you probably normally go to first. Maybe I should put that as page 1, and you can not have to turn so many pages in the future. But it has been updated for fiscal year 23 numbers for the 2.5% that the governor signed last week for SSA. And so those numbers are going to be pretty close to accurate at this point. What's left to certify the budget is primarily on the instructional support side, and that's just flips the revenue stream, whether it's property taxes or the income surtax. So it's not going to really change the dollars available as we work through those or last couple pieces over the next week. There's just a couple numbers that haven't been released by the state yet, so it will impact those. But it's interesting to note that I had done this using 2.25%, thinking we wouldn't. That was the Senate's version, thinking maybe they'd end up at the lower. The 2.5 added $325,000-$30,000 in each of the 4 years it's presented, so it does have a nice cumulative effect or additive effect, whatever the math people would say for that. But so that's all been factored throughout the 2.5 and what that per student amount does going forward. We're still maintaining just an assumptions of increased growth of 135 students, a real modest growth. Adam's team is working on a demographer's report that we hope to have later this spring, and as soon as that becomes available, we'll start plugging those numbers in as well. You can see that we're just using 1.5% as we go out, and the key is how we transition out of all of the ESSER funds. And so every time I pull this document up, I'm tweaking it just a little bit because of new positions we have added, haven't added, how we're going to transition folks and trying to keep it as close to possible. So it's not that I want to create a moving target for you folks or for us as a management group, but it's just a matter of those numbers are always changing, and so we're trying to look at that so that we are working from what appears to be the most accurate information for that. And so you can see that, with 1.5% growth over those next 3 years after fiscal year 23 and a 2% growth in expenditures, which you can say, okay, that's too low because we're in an inflationary period of 5 to 7% on most things. You would anticipate that the 5 or 7% would be factored in the current year, and then inflation would go back to a more normal 2% for those expenditures in years after that, and not be 7% each year. I'm hopeful of that. You look at me with a questioning eye there, JP.
I hope so too.
So that's why those are held at 2%, because that would be the year-over-year change and not what it is in a current year. One thing that's interesting to note, if we were able to get 2.5% in each of those next 3 years, I hate to even put this number out there, but those 3 years would add $8 million over those 3 years just by going from 1.5 to 2.5%. So you can see that makes a huge difference there. So your efforts to continue to lobby our legislatures for that is
$8 million a year?
No, $8 million is cumulative, Charlie, over those 3 years, about 2.1 million, between 2.1 and 2.4 million dollars.
How many teaching positions is that?
A lot.
A lot.
I know it's oversimplified, but yeah, I mean, it'd be significant, Charlie. I think one thing that, Les and I spend a lot of time looking at is on the bottom of page 11, when you look at projected year unspent balance and then total amount the revenue exceeds the break-even point. So you can tell here that we build our unspent balance really in a nice, healthy position as we come out of the ESSER funds, right? Because we were able to avoid a budget cut that we would have had to do last year. we're able to keep some staff on. We actually added FTE to the system. But you can tell that that number turns around and goes into a more deficit spending model, right? Where that unspent balance actually starts to decrease after a couple years. And so again, this is all based on Les's assumptions, and he explained to you kind of the 1.5% think through there. But that's the problem for us, right? If we don't move sufficient number of FTE out of the system, then it starts to eat that unspent balance and that unspent balance ratio. And so it's nice for the district that we've been able to get it back into this 5 to 10% range, but we also have then some effort to try to keep it there, right? That we've returned to a healthy financial position, and we'd want to maintain that, and we can't continue to deficit spend year after year, because you know that quickly digs us to a hole, even if we're in a healthy position to start with. So I always appreciate Les's summary there and what he provides to us, but I always think, okay, with all of that, what's the most important thing we look at? That's the assumption, that I'd always spend the most time on for you guys just to kind of be looking at. And sorry if that's a simplification to some of you that have done this for a while, but I think that's helpful base level understanding to kind of look at, okay, where's our total financial picture and what's it look like?
Matt, thanks for pointing that out, because, we're here too in the years where we're sitting there at 2 and 1, but with those projections, that's what always gives me confidence, is like, okay, and we're going to weather that storm, and we're going to get through. And now we see it realized where we're getting at between that 5 and 10. And so, we can weather a few years down to, under 2, as long as in the near term it's going to come up between 5 and 10. And I had faith that we'd go there, and based on your expertise, and here we are. So I also really appreciate pointing that out.
Thanks.
I'm just thinking that next September, we're going to start getting emails again that my kid's class size is too large. And whenever I hear that, my instinct is to go to unspent balance and increase the numbers of teachers.
That is always one place to go, Charlie, and you're exactly right.
Another place, I'd be happy to go to another place.
But the thing to remember is that every time we add one of those, it compounds itself in future years. So it's not just adding staff in that one year. Each year successive to that those people stay in the system, they also bring down those other years. And so, we add 10 staff, which is right close to $1 million. In 1 year, then that next year, those people are, $1,020,000 or whatever it is, and so they continue to eat down at that. It's not a one-time expenditure.
I understand that, and you understand that, and I understand that. But the people whose kids are in a classroom that has 28, 29 kids in it, they don't understand that.
Sure, and I think some of the pain we endured this year through that, Charlie, was due to some of the timing of the transitions, right? And then also the COVID part of that, with knowing that we were potentially having some large class sizes with the concern around COVID. So I do always think that's a legitimate conversation for us to have. That's why Amy will eventually talk about staffing levels we'll set for the elementary. We were able to be really aggressive actually with class size this year when we delivered that class size data to you. We had small class sizes in comparison to the last few years past. We won't be able to continue that at the elementary level, right? We'll be moving some of those schools to different levels, and we'll be presenting that to you. But I think from a policy perspective, the way the board wants to look at it, my suggestion would be you ask me to keep it between a 5 to 10% unspent balance, right? And so then whenever we make staffing costs, there's adjustments to that. And so that's been the philosophical approach, that the superintendent needs to keep the unspent balance between 5 and 10%. And if we're going to go outside of that, or if there's a different philosophy from the board, that's to Les's concern. And then that'll start to give him heartburn, right? Because when we get into that really below 5%, that's the conversation we had to have with the SBRC, right? A month ago was, okay, your categoricals are basically the only thing keeping you above right now, and that's not really accessible funds for you. So those are all factors into it, but I think that's why that conversation about what is the ideal unspent balance for a district is where that has to start, because then it informs all of our next steps on staffing and how we approach that staffing.
I mean, you talk about the difference between 1.5 and 2.5, how big that is.
Yeah.
Imagine if it was 5, like a number we asked for, right? I mean, it's one thing that we can say, okay, we can count on, maybe we're going to increase this number of teachers because we're going to get this many more students. Can we add any programming? Can we, take care of the staff that we already have? We're still limited in a lot of ways by those numbers. So I mean, you know, just looking at it from the perspective of how many dollars does that raise to add teachers, you know, it's great because we want more, but there's other things we want to do, right? And I can't get excited about 2.5, right? We've trained ourselves to be excited about 2.5. And it's frustrating because that's not nearly enough. And I'm going to be the Debbie Downer after you just talked about how we're coming out of a hole. But we're coming out of a hole because we're limited in what we're able to do, right? If we did all the stuff we wanted to do, we'd have a really big hole, right?
Right.
So just keep that.
Well, and we're going to have
in mind
new
as well.
considerations and conversation. You know, it's not going to be totally cost neutral to go to a middle school format with staffing, right? Those are all going to be parts of the process that we have to work through about what that staffing process looks like. You know, we know there could be new elementary sites, right? So all of these things are eventually going to be costs for the district, and those are all the parts that Les works into that model, which tweaking one of those numbers makes the equation change a lot. And so it's not always just a straight wash for, well, it looks like we have an extra $1 million to do this. Well, that's built on a lot of assumptions in there. I just think that's always a nice financial health picture to look at for the district about where we sit and to give us a good picture about where we're going or what we might have, you know, trouble on the horizon. Like this is something we're going to have to look at and avoid, like we talked about a lot with Liberty High School, knowing that was going to be a pressure point. And once we came out of that, then the budget would start to recover a little bit, or we'd have to make some adjustments to have it recover. So, sorry, Les, I kind of jumped in the middle of your talk through the financial report there as we got into some questions. I don't know if you had anything else to add. but,
I would say
yeah.
it maybe in a less negative way, despite our limitations. I appreciate your work, Les, in keeping us in a good place.
Thank you.
right? I appreciate how much effort that takes
And I would
from
share
the whole team.
two other things from you, kind of from a legislative perspective on the finance side. There's a lot of policy things going on out there that I won't get into, but there is still the House bill that does about a $39 per pupil across the state one-time funding, which would come in as miscellaneous income. That's really being portrayed as the impact of inflation and districts having to meet the needs of higher salaries or adding to the cost there, and not to be ongoing for programs since it is one time. It's their reaction to the inflationary. That's still alive on the House side. I don't know when the Senate will take it up, if at all. So if you hear anything about that, that's the latest I have on that. And the other one that you may be hearing about is the teacher retention bonus. We do not have very much information on that at all. In fact, the DE is doing a webinar tomorrow afternoon, so hopefully we'll have more. I had a conversation with Brady earlier today about it. Matt and I have talked about it as well, and so it's just a huge number of unknowns. So if you're getting that question from any of our staff, we don't know because we haven't been given that, other than it was thrown out there when the governor signed the 2.5% bill. She said that that was going to be part of it using the ARP fund. So that's where it is. We wish we had more on that, not only for you, but for our teachers and what it means and how it just flows procedurally.
Very good. Anything else, directors? Thank you, Les. I really appreciate it. Let's go ahead and move into our action items. You'll see our 400 series policies again. Is there any further discussion on this? I've seen it a couple times now. If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the 400 series policies.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. Next up, this kind of got added a little bit later, but it's a resolution by our board in regards to vouchers. Matt could probably do a better job of explaining it, and I'll let him. I know this is something that multiple districts are kind of putting something together of this format, so I don't know if you have some more context to.
Sure, and I think it's just important that we recognize that we call it what it is, right? That it is vouchers that the governor's talking about and then the legislature's talking about. That's guys under a lot of different things around parent choice and channeling, you know, some of even the frustrations we heard this evening. But what we heard from also our legislators on Friday talks about 150% increase in the last 6 years for private and homeschool services. So for private school and homeschool services, they've seen a 150% increase. During that period of time, public schools have seen an average percentage increase of 1.8%. And so that shows you where priorities stand at the point for the state legislature and the governor's office. And we believe public funds should stay with public schools, that those are tax dollars that should be committed to standing up our public education system and looking at improving public schools. Competition doesn't lead to improved student outcomes. We've seen that repeated in state after state. It's not going to be different here in Iowa. And so I think we need to recognize that, and our efforts should be focused on improvements efforts for our public schools and for the institution of public education. So really this resolution here tonight is one that you've, if you followed the news, may have seen in a couple other districts, basically just affirming the board's support of that line of thinking, and that is something that we believe is important here to recognize in Iowa City and in the Iowa City Community School District.
I don't know if there's further comment. I mean, I think one of the first lines there is public funds are for public schools. That by itself says it all for me. You know, the rest of it's absolutely true, but that's the crux of it, right? So we're here to support public schools.
Yeah.
Well, I think another aspect that's really important to me is that the public school system does a better job of educating all the students in the public than the private school system does. That's been the case, you know, for a long time. And if there was anything that I was going to add to this resolution, it'd be a clause that says that public education is a better option for students, considered as a whole. But I'm not going to make that suggestion, but it's a part of why I'm supporting this resolution.
I do think that that's always important in the narrative, because this voucher proposal is getting traction. It is making people care more about public education and how they vote, and we'll see to what extent. But I think it is important to, when we talk about it, to always say public schools are the best. It's not the backup plan. Because if you listen to the narrative coming out of Des Moines, it's, oh, the poor kids that are stuck in public school, they don't have a choice to go anywhere else. Well, thank goodness our public schools are the best.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how it's set up. That's why our tax dollars pay for it, because they're the best option. It's just an important thing to always think about, because otherwise the narrative can almost undermine public schools.
Yeah, I'm not going to start a soapbox here. I won't stop. So I mean, I support this. So Harley, you know, and maybe one point to make is we're also transparent. You know, we invite folks for public comment. They can talk about what they want. We give them 4 minutes. You know, we're open and accessible. And some folks might maybe think not enough, but we are. And that's not something you have in a private school. And private schools can say no, and they do turn kids away. And that we educate all kids who show up. So I appreciate it and certainly support this.
Any of you cheerleaders out there want to make a motion?
Well, I'll move to approve the resolution, the voucher opposition resolution.
Second.
All right, Kim, let's vote.
Online voting is open. Yours isn't coming up, Jane.
Oh, wait, there it is.
Get out of here.
All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. And I hope I didn't say cheerleader to make it sound like a bad thing. I actually love the fact that we're all cheerleaders for our entity and
No
public
offense was
education in
taken.
general.
Right? Yeah.
Right. I guess that's a nice segue into our legislative update, and I think Matt's going to lead us off.
Yeah, you bet. I'll kick us off. And I think just to piggyback on the last conversation, a story that's always stuck with me a lot when we talk about public schools being the best and our best hope for our democracy is Jamie Volmer, that came to talk to the district a few years ago His book is called Schools Do Not Do It Alone, and he talks about actually being a young businessman getting schooled by an Iowa teacher, talking about as he was trying to produce his blueberry ice cream, what happened when he got a bad batch of blueberries. And he said, well, you throw them out. And the teacher, quickly told him, we don't throw anybody out. We serve them all. And that's part of what makes us the best, right, is that we serve every kid that walks through the doors. We don't expel anybody. We keep them all here in Iowa City, and we do the best we can with them. Do we have our faults? Do we have our areas to improve? Sure, you heard about some tonight, right? But that's our mission, and that's what we're here to do. So I think that's part of what makes us the best, and also part of what breaks our heart when we see some of the things like happened yesterday. Yesterday, the House passed House File Senate 2416, also known as the Anti-Transgender Sports Ban. The bill is now moved to the Senate for review. This bill attempts to prevent transgender athletes from participating in high school and in some cases college and elementary school sports. The Iowa City Community School District is strongly opposed to this bill. We want to make clear our ongoing support for transgender students and student athletes. Our district has in place one of the most robust policies in the country to protect our LGBTQ youth. This proposed bill will not detract from our commitment to ensure every member of our school community is valued and respected regardless of gender identity and sexual orientation. An attack on transgender students is an attack on all of our civil rights. Now is the time to contact your local state senator. So we wanted to read that statement this evening. It's also been posted on our social media feed today, and just make sure that our students and staff knew that we supported them. And as these things continue to happen, we went through this with the critical race theory conversation last spring and how we'd try to come back and do the best we could to wrap around our students and staff and support them. And that's the same thing we'll do after this legislative session. But these are some of the difficulties that we're encountering, right, and some of the things about destabilizing public ed that's up against. And so just as a quick update, Les had already reviewed around the 2.5% and what that did to our budget with the quarterly financial report that we talked about this evening. He touched on the teacher payments that we'll learn more about tomorrow. Honestly, I'm a little skeptical based on the way some of that language was put out to us about stayed full-time and on the job. Some of the language that was used and communicated to us in the email to invite us to the webinar seems loaded, and so we wonder what we'll learn about tomorrow with that. Around vouchers, we still have questions around special education and obligations for the public district to provide those services with any kind of a voucher bill or plan and what happens there. You heard the statement around the transgender athlete bill. Libraries and curriculum choices has been another one. I would just remind our community that we have a very strong and robust curriculum review process, and any kind of challenge to a book in the library or in our curriculum, we have an established process, actually one that we know some legislators used as a potential model that other districts could pattern themselves after if parents have concerns. That's there. We don't use it frequently, but that is our process, right? We have avenues for parents to do that. We have transparency with our parents around what our teachers post. We had parents in kids' living rooms for a good part of the year last year as we were doing this, or in their teacher's living room for a good part of the year as we were trying to teach online and serve our kids. And so, again, I think some of the ideas around this, come to a breeding of mistrust, and I don't think that's what's there with our students and family as a whole. And so when we look at whether it's banning the curriculum or the Parents' Bill of Rights, I just think it's channeling a real dangerous conversation for us, and that's going to be the long-term consequence of legislative sessions like this, right, is how do we continue to heal as a community, because I really think that's what we have to look at after we go through these things. There's almost a period of healing about how are we going to do this together, right? How are we going to work through some of the pieces that have been dealt to us. So I don't want to just rattle off specifics from bills. A lot of you guys were at the legislative session on Friday where they talked about that. Mary encouraged us to give her some feedback for a couple of the ones centered around the Parents' Bill of Rights. And I thought there was another one I'm missing here as I'm going through my review, and I can't think of the name of it. But any questions, be happy to do that. Last time we shared our legislative priorities flyer with you guys that Kristen did a great job on and that the UEN's been doing. But I think I touched on the ones that had probably the most severe long-term impact for us. So questions or other statements from the board?
I think the other thing she mentioned, and maybe this isn't what you're referring to, is that bill about teachers being able to move around from one district to the other after there's some sort of infraction. That was the thing she talked about after that.
About some, they kind of channeled into I think some of the parents' frustration about that if the reports were made, and then how a teacher is allowed to potentially work in another district if some of those concerns aren't getting reported to the Board of Educational Examiners. So I think that's just been another piece in conjunction with some of the language coming out of there. So Brady's also here, not to put him on the spot, but Brady stays really in tune with this stuff too. And so I know he'd be happy to, answer any questions. He probably doesn't want to make an official statement for the union here tonight, but at the same time, we all try to stay engaged with this and throughout, and he attends our legislative forum, so we thank him for that and his advocacy as well.
I think part of that bill, Maka, was I think there was language in there, like, basically there was the potential for losing your teacher license for a crime that had nothing to do with teaching or being in a classroom.
Any aggravated misdemeanor.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the word, so thank you for that.
Yeah, that's right.
Which
I
is
still understood that wrong. Yeah.
interesting, right? I mean, obviously there are things that are illegal that don't have anything to do with the classroom that you'd probably not want that teacher in your classroom, but there are some other stuff that there's a connection being made in that bill that is a little scary and blurry, I guess is probably a good way to put it as well. So,
And, we have standards of practice.
Right.
So if teachers behave in a way that's not acceptable to the community, we have evaluation that has a mechanism to deal with that. This is not like it doesn't exist. So that's in there. Standard 8 really gives boards a wide latitude to police behavior in ways that they might deem is inappropriate for their community. So it's there. This is again, just once again, taking away local control, taking it out of a local board's hand and trying to paint everybody with the same brush that's coming from a real distinct political view. But I don't know, Brady, if you have anything to...
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Matt, for the lead-in. So I'd just like to thank the board for the resolution. I think it was wonderful collaboration between IASB and ISEA and lots of districts around the state. Matt did an awesome job in setting that up, and so thanks for passing that. And I would say I think it's important for all of us. They had their first funnel week legislatively, and sometimes there's some interesting parliamentary moves that happen, and so some bills you might think are dead aren't necessarily dead. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to really stay attentive to that, and then also to do outreach. Our legislators are fantastic in our county by and large, and we have maybe one outlier on that, but by and large they're really, really strong. And I think it's incumbent that we reach out to folks. I grew up in a small town, so it's that the school is the heartbeat of the town. They amazingly have stayed unconsolidated, and they have a weekly newspaper, and it's the subject matter of the newspaper. And I think it's that sort of building a bridge to some of our smaller communities to let them know that, like, we're all in this together in public education. That's the thing that Iowa should be known for and what we used to be known for. And I think those sorts of things are important because it's going to come down to votes, as we know. And so that's a matter of building bridges and making connections with folks who are outside of Johnson County. And, Director, Pilcher-Hayek is saying, changing the narrative so that we're celebrating, public schools. And so there's still some things that are out there that I think, could have a pretty big effect on what we were able to do financially and what happens to us emotionally. So I just think it's important, to not only stay attentive, but then also do outreach. It's family and friends that you know across the state, reaching out to them and really having conversations to say, we're in this together. If you have a legislator that maybe is on the fence about this, because there are some, make a contact with them. That sort of advocacy, I think, is important. We can't just stay in the Johnson County bubble, as much as I love it here, and, and advocate internally. So, but yeah, thanks. I mean, there's lots happening. It's just important, as you have a great influence as an elected body, and a good role in advocacy. So thanks for everything you're doing, and keep it up.
To Brady's point, the thing that we heard at the committee meeting was that while the legislators know that, or believe that the voucher bill won't pass through the Ed Committee, Pat Grassley's going to move it to the Appropriations Committee, where he thinks he can get it passed. So anyone who was already kind of thinking, oh, that's not going to work again, they're really going to double down on that voucher bill.
And Brady's right, talking to people outside of our community and the rural communities. I mean, the consequences of vouchers going through and what happens to our rural communities and those rural public schools is really disastrous. And that's part of the shell game with some of the funding around the 30% kickback to the rural schools, but it's still a 70% loss of per pupil. They're going to try to keep their existing program, right? They're not going to want to shrink their program because that's what they're offering in that school, but they're going to lose 70% of the funding for every kid that leaves. So that's not a scenario that keeps very long, right? And so I think trying to help some of the other communities understand that maybe aren't as plugged into the issue around that is a big thing we can do. And thanks for cleaning up that other conversation, because yes, we're actually talking about criminal penalties for educators around the obscenities and some of the materials conversation that's been going on, which, you know, like JP said, we have standards and practice of place to deal with concerns we have that come from adults. So just frustrating.
And, you know, just to remind you, the NEA came out with a poll, but Ed Week came out with another poll. 54% of teachers talking about leaving in the next 2 years.
Well,
You know-
Brady used the word demoralizing, to have our legislators talk the way they're talking. And I thought that was a very descriptive, but also very sad state of affairs. So I think everyone in this room already knows that we have to be pumping up our teachers and letting them know how much we respect them. But hopefully people beyond this room are realizing how we really have to support our teachers right now.
Speaking of which, are we allowed to bring like treats in for teachers now? Like, are we beyond that?
It's what we want to talk about on the 8th, right? Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about it on the 8th. Got it. Cookies by then.
Mm-hmm. But you do see those things on social media about thank a teacher, and I think that's the other scope we need to have, right? I mean, they've all settled in the best they can around COVID and the challenges with that. Now it's these other factors, right, that continue on, and some of that repair we're talking about with communities that just have to continue to happen. And so, you know, any of those efforts I know are appreciated by our staff to do that, and we've tried to do things along the way to recognize that. But anything we can do as a community, I think, goes a long ways for them.
For sure. All right. Shall we move on? We've got one item left, our agenda setting. We do have another work session, that's FMP 2.0. I will continue with the conversations that we've been having, but I think probably also just look at all the projects, right, the whole plan together and how it's going to work, and keep discussion going there. Our regular board meeting, back to the first one of the month, so we do have our student representative update and ICA update from Brady. And then the regular stuff and consent, and our regular stuff and discussion there. We talked last time about having, kind of one bigger conversation. And we're gonna have a conversation around the calendar and some of the thoughts that Superintendent Degner has around that, looking at it kind of in a different way a little bit. So that's gonna be a good discussion, I think. Is there other smaller things that folks want to get on there, or other bigger ideas to slot in future meetings? I know we had a couple last time that we're trying to schedule out.
For the calendar discussion, is any of that part of the work, can we make some of that part of the work session? Or do we have enough time to talk about major calendar changes other than this particular upcoming meeting?
I think we could find future times to do it, like at a future work session, for sure. Probably not the one that's on that night.
Right.
So this might be the start of the conversation more so than the end of it. Is that what you're kind of asking for?
Just trying to think for myself, to making a major calendar change after one opportunity to discuss it.
For sure. Yeah, I think we can.
Yeah, I think we definitely would have
second.
a series of conversations. Charlie will definitely not ask you to commit to anything that evening. It's more to explore an idea and to see what kind of legs it may have, or kind of support, and probably some additional steps we would need to check into to see if it's something we'd want to continue to converse about. So.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, sometimes you throw out the first idea and it might spark others, right? So we can grow from there.
Right.
Other topics, folks?
The only thing I'd wonder is if, would it be helpful to put out a more board official statement about the trans statement, similar to what we made tonight? I don't know. Again, we have a good policy. I know that we've got our internal policies in place, so I don't know if that's something that would be helpful, or if, so I just throw that out there to do something a little more, because I appreciate making a statement now because of the urgency, and I don't know if there's anything else that we could do that would send the message that we support all of our kids.
I think generally it's a good idea when there are huge topics like this for the community to hear from the board as one message, if we all agree to that message. So I would be in favor of doing that whenever we hit these big moments, so that the community knows what we're thinking. Otherwise, they hear about what I'm thinking on my Facebook page, which all of you are welcome to join me on. But I do think it would be nice if the community heard from us as a whole. We're fortunate to be on a board where I think there'll be a lot of times where we can give them that kind of unified message.
Right. Yeah, I'd support that.
Agree.
I wonder if a suggestion, sorry, I don't know why I did that, put the mask down. It's getting late, huh? If a resolution would make sense at the next meeting, if you guys would want to follow up on that, we could structure it the same way, and we could pass a resolution in support of our trans students and
I think
staff.
we should talk about it at agenda setting on Monday with the three of us. I'm concerned that we're going to be reactive because it's already passed, one branch in our government. It could get through the second one before we even have another meeting. So it's going to be, we don't like this, that they just passed this, and how are we going to support our students because of it, versus we're absolutely against it, don't do it, right? I think a timing of it's going to be very difficult, right? The message will have to be tailored. I think
That makes sense.
Either way, I think, however we say it, we have to show our support for our students, right? So I think the message will have to be carefully crafted there, depending on what happens.
Yep.
All right. Anything else? Good stuff.
It's not even 8 o'clock, Sean. It's early. What do you
City
got?
High's
Still
playing.
going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Okay, move to adjourn.
Okay, I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.